You've heard the word 1,000 times. Someone online is always talking about buying the dip, or riding a stock to the moon, or losing their shirt on some ticker symbol. You've probably nodded along. You've probably never actually known what you were buying. Here's the truth, stripped down to what's actually happening. A stock is ownership. That's it. When you buy a stock, you are not buying a number on a screen that goes up and down for no reason. You are buying a small, real piece of an actual business. Think of a company like a pizza. Not one giant single object, but something that can be sliced. A business can be cut into hundreds, thousands, sometimes billions of tiny slices. Each slice is called a share. When you buy a share, you're saying, in effect, I'll take that piece of the company, please. Own enough slices, and you own a real percentage of that pizza. Whether it's a fraction of a percent or a meaningful chunk. Here's the part most people skip past without asking. Why would a company ever want to sell pieces of itself to total strangers? The answer is money, and more specifically, money that never has to be paid back. Building a business costs cash. New equipment, new locations, new hires, inventory, marketing, simply staying alive, long enough to become profitable. A company could borrow that money from a bank, but a loan comes with interest. And interest is a debt that has to be repaid no matter what happens next, whether the business booms or barely scrapes by. Miss a loan payment, and there can be serious consequences, sometimes including losing collateral pledged against that loan. Selling shares works differently. The company gets the cash it needs, and in exchange, it gives up a small piece of ownership. No repayment schedule, no interest, no looming deadline. Just new owners, who now have a stake in whether the company succeeds, and who share in the outcome right alongside the original founders, for better or worse. Let's make this concrete with a story because the mechanics only click once you see them play out. Picture someone named Ren, who wants to open a specialty bike repair shop. Ren has done the math. The build-out, the tools, the first few months of rent comes to $60,000. Ren has saved $30,000. That's half of what's needed. Instead of taking out a loan, Ren decides to split ownership of the shop into 6 equal shares, each one representing 1/6 of the business. Since Ren is putting in half the total cost, Ren keeps 3 shares. The other 3 go up for sale at $10,000 each, to anyone willing to bet on the shop's future. A regular customer named Dev, who's watched Ren fix bikes for years, buys one of those shares for $10,000. It's not a small decision. $10,000 is real money, and Dev spends a week going back and forth before finally deciding the shop is worth betting on. Dev now owns 1/6 of the business, not the building, not the tools. A real legal claim on 1/6 of whatever that shop is worth, now and in the future. With Dev's money and 2 other investors joining in, Ren has the full $60,000 and opens the shop. Here's where it gets real, because this is the part most people leave out when they talk about investing, like it's a guaranteed win. 3 years later, the shop is doing well. Word spread, a second location opened, and the whole business is now valued at $90,000. Dev's 1/6 share, once worth $10,000, is now worth $15,000. If Dev sold today, that's a $5,000 profit, just for believing in a bike shop early. But rewind that same story and change one thing. Say a bigger chain opens 2 blocks away, undercutting prices, and the shop's value drops to $42,000 instead of climbing. Dev's 1/6 share is now worth $7,000. That's a $3,000 loss on the exact same investment, the exact same shares, just a different outcome for the business underneath them. This is the part nobody posts about. The upside gets shared everywhere. The downside barely gets mentioned, but it is just as real, and it is the other half of what owning a stock actually means. You are not just buying potential growth. You are buying the business's actual outcome, whatever that turns out to be. This is exactly how real stocks work, just multiplied to a much bigger scale, across public companies with millions or billions of shares instead of 6. Some companies also choose to share a portion of their profits directly with shareholders through something called a dividend. It's a small payout, simply for being an owner, on top of whatever the shares themselves are worth. There's a common misconception worth clearing up here too. Buying a stock doesn't mean sending your money directly to the company. If you buy shares of a company today, in almost every case, your money goes to whoever currently owns those shares and is willing to sell, not to the company itself. The company only receives money directly during the initial sale of new shares, which is usually a one-time event, or occasionally when it issues additional new shares later on. After that, shares simply change hands between investors, over and over, and the company's role becomes more like the pizza itself sitting there, while slices trade between different owners. So where do people actually go to buy and sell these ownership slices? They go to a stock exchange, which is essentially a massive organized marketplace built specifically for trading shares. The two most well-known exchanges in the United States are the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. You don't need to physically go anywhere. Nearly all of this happens through an app or a brokerage account, where an order to buy or sell gets matched almost instantly with someone on the other side of that trade. Now, here's something most beginner explanations skip entirely. Not all stock is the same kind of stock. When companies issue shares, they typically offer two different flavors: common stock and preferred stock. Think of it like a regular ticket and a VIP ticket to the same show. Both get you in the door, but the experience is different. Common stock is what most people picture when they hear the word stock. Owning common stock usually comes with voting rights, meaning you get a say in major company decisions and a vote in electing the board of directors. One share, one vote. 1,000 shares, 1,000 votes. Common stock might pay a dividend, but that's never guaranteed. If the company has a rough year, that payout can simply disappear. What common stock does offer is the highest ceiling for growth. If the business takes off, common shares can climb dramatically in value. The trade-off is risk. If a company goes bankrupt, common stockholders are paid last after every debt and every other obligation is settled. Sometimes that means getting nothing at all. Preferred stock works differently. Picture it as the more cautious, steady sibling of common stock. Preferred shareholders typically give up voting rights entirely. In exchange, they usually get something common. Stockholders don't: dividend payments that are fixed and reliable and paid out before common stockholders ever see a dividend at all. If the company goes bankrupt, preferred shareholders are still behind anyone the company owes actual debt to, but they stand ahead of common stockholders in line. Preferred stock generally offers less explosive growth potential, but more predictable, steady income along the way. Neither one is objectively better. It depends entirely on what you're actually looking for. Maximum growth potential, with real risk attached, points toward common stock. Reliable income, with less drama, points toward preferred. Most individual investors buying stocks through a regular brokerage app are holding common stock without necessarily realizing there was ever a choice to make, since preferred shares tend to trade less frequently and get talked about far less often, even though they exist for nearly every major public company. Here's the question worth sitting with. Why would anyone put money into something this uncertain instead of just leaving it safely in a bank account? The honest answer is growth. A typical savings account might pay somewhere around 1 to 2% interest a year. The stock market, averaged out over long stretches of history, has historically returned somewhere in the range of 7 to 10% a year. That's not a guarantee for any single year. Some years are sharply negative, sometimes by double digits. But it's the long-term average that makes stocks worth the added risk for many investors willing to leave that money alone for years rather than needing it back next month. Some people buy and hold for decades, betting on a company's long-term direction. Others trade far more frequently, trying to profit from short-term price movement instead, which is a fundamentally different game with a different risk profile entirely. Remember Ren's bike shop and Dev's 1/6 stake in it. When Dev bought that share, Dev wasn't buying a random number that moves for no reason. Dev was buying a real piece of a real business, the wins that came with it, and the risk that came with it too. That's what a stock actually is, whether it's a small local shop split into 6 pieces or a massive public company split into billions. If this made stocks finally make sense, do 2 things: hit the like button and subscribe, so the next confusing money topic gets broken down just as clearly. You've heard the word 1,000 times. Now you actually know what you're buying.